It's time to get nerdy, y'all.
A little bit of gaming history for you.
Something relevant in gaming and discuss our opinions on it.
Should we kick it out of here, or should we kick-start it?
This is the part where you, the listeners, try to stump the hosts.
I'm not a lawyer. I just play one on a podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, lads and lasses of all ages, welcome to the show. It is Tuesday, June 27th, 2023, and it is time to get nerdy. Welcome to episode 273 of Two Nerds in a Pod, the nerdiest gaming podcast in the multiverse. I am Maction, and I have my friend, my fellow nerd, a connoisseur of comedy, not just the first option, but the best option, Mr. Lamgaluka, also known as Mr. Nice Guy 425, and for the next hour, we're gonna cover all kinds of topics relating to video game, be it news, history, trivia, lawsuits, and everything in between. But first, Mr. Nice Guy, how are you doing, man?
Mac, I am good, man. I'm a little bit tired, but I'm happy. Like, life is really, really good. I feel like I got the perfect balance of all the things that I want to be doing. I've been taking up golf, as I told you in the past. And one of the things that I love to do is go to what are called executive courses, which are not what they sound like. They are short courses with par 3 holes. So in other words, they're shorter courses that a quote-unquote executive could play on a lunch break, right? They're shorter courses for, like, beginners, basically. Or for people supposedly trying to close business deals traditionally. So anyway, there's an executive course in the place I live. I've been going there, and I show up, and there's never any employees there. And so I asked the other people, I was like, how do I pay? How do I pay to golf on this course? And they were like, if there's no employee, you just kind of golf, you know? And I was like, well, should I pay double next time? And they were like, if you want to, or you could just golf. So the first time I went there, I just golfed. And then I went back on Monday night, Mac, and there was actually an employee there. So I was like, okay, you know, I have a conscience. I am going to pay, right?
Mm-hmm.
The door is locked. The guy is inside. I knock on the door. He ignores me. He's watching TV or reading a magazine or something. Kind of like that whole shtick of, like, I don't want to be bothered.
Uh-huh.
So I, like, walk around the building because it's, like, a completely glass area. And I'm, like, waving to him. And he finally comes over, and he looks at me, and he just, like, motions to the golf course. He's like, just go golf. Like, don't overthink that. Like, just go golf. Like, I appreciate what you're trying to do. Just go golf. And so I just, like, gave him a thumbs up side through the glass, and he gave me a thumbs up side back, and I just went and golfed. So I think I may have found a free golf course. That's why I shared that. We all like deals.
Which just goes to show that Nice Guy doesn't just have a nose for deals in the video game sphere, also in the golfing sphere. So please hit him up at Nice Guy Gaming for any type of golf tips you need. You golfing on a budget?
That's right.
He's got you.
Well, hey, Mac, enough about golf, though. What's new with you, man? What have you been up to?
Oh, man, I've just been up to kind of the usual, doing stuff at work. I haven't had, although I'm expecting to get some particularly crazy people over the 4th of July weekend, been pretty tame lately. Yeah, some video games here and there, watching some good TV with the spouse, and playing some Dungeons and Dragons on occasion.
Love it.
I mean, I feel like you kind of said it. It's just like you've got the right mix of a lot of things. I kind of feel like that's exactly how things are going for me right now, too.
Love to hear it. Well, Mac, on that note, I say we do what we do best and hop right up in that gaming news, man. What do you think about that?
Let's do it. Mr. Nice Guy, what's new in video gaming? Because I'm out of the loop.
There's so much that's new. And as a reminder, this is episode 273 of Two Nerds in a Pod, nerdiest video game podcast in the galaxy. Well, Mac, last week we talked about the upcoming Nintendo Direct. And since then, the Nintendo Direct has happened. There's been a few good announcements. We talked about what type of 2D Mario we'd like to see if it was indeed announced. And here's what we're getting, Mac, by Marcus Stewart on GameInformer.com. Today's Nintendo Direct ended with the reveal of a new 2D Mario game called Super Mario Bros. Wonder. Before you ask, this is not a new Super Mario Bros. This brand new adventure sports a revamped art style and more expressive characters. and stars the familiar foursome of Mario, Luigi, Peach, and Toad, in addition to Daisy and Yoshi. The 2D world sport trippy features caused by a new power-up called the Wonder Flower. This transforms the world and gameplay in unexpected ways. Pipes come to life, Mario can stretch his body to absurd lengths, and hordes of stampeding rhinos can appear, among other wacky effects. Mac, bottom line is that Super Mario Bros. Wonder looks like a trip, and it launches on October 20th. Just because we had talked about wanting an old school Mario, are you disappointed by this? Like you've said in the past that if someone was to gift you a Switch, you'd accept it, you'd play it. Is this a game that you would pick up? Or is this something that's a pass for Mac because it's not retro?
No, I can appreciate non-retro things, Mr. Nice Guy, and I think I would possibly appreciate this. I mean, tight controls, solid platforming, and a little bit of interesting takes in the Mario universe. I think I could be down for it.
Now, here's my secondary question, because one of the other announcements was Super Mario RPG Remake. Does that excite you? Did you ever play the old school Super Mario RPG? And does it coming out again excite you, even though you may not be a Switch owner?
So I only got a Super Nintendo circa 2016, 2017. Shout out to Crux Capacitor for sending me a SNES in perfect shape.
Nice.
Even, clean colors and everything. Hadn't yellowed or anything.
Ooh.
A delightful gift, and I have not made it to Super Mario RPG in my going back through Super Nintendo games. But I know that it is beloved, and I love sort of turn-based games kind of like that. It's very much a game that is on my list to take care of, but it's hard, Mr. Nice Guy, because there are so many good games out there. And every year, every week, we're adding more and more games. So it's, I think it keeps getting backburnered.
Dude, it's really good, though.
You like it?
I loved it back in the day, and I'd love to have a physical copy of it. I don't know if I will be picking up this remake, just because I've played it before, almost all the way through. I didn't finish it, I admit. But I like that a new generation is getting to experience this, because it's one of those games, and I'd have to Google how much it costs, but I know it's not a cheap pickup. So it's either buy a physical one, play a ROM, or now do the Switch version that's going to be released. So I think that this is a really smart move. Not every SNES game needs to be remade, but I think that this is a good one for Nintendo to do.
Agreed. And, I mean, if I had a Switch, I think this is a game I'd probably pick up.
Well, Mac, we have got some more news stories that are a little bit more heavy-hitting and deal specifically with the Microsoft FTC trial that is going on right now as they attempt to acquire Activision. Now, you and I have been on opposite sides of the fence on this in the past. We have two news stories today on this topic. Let's spend our time on that because I want to get your perspective. Now, this one, I'm super interested to hear your thoughts. This is on IGN.com by Taylor Lyles. PlayStation boss Jim Ryan has admitted that he does not view Starfield's Xbox console exclusivity as anti-competitive. I'm going to read that one more time for the people in the back. PlayStation boss Jim Ryan has admitted he does not view Starfield's Xbox console exclusivity as anti-competitive. During the ongoing trial between Microsoft and the Federal Trade Commission, the head of PlayStation took the stand. During his testimony, he was asked if anything was wrong with Arcane Studios' Redfall and Bethesda Game Studios' Starfield being console exclusives to Xbox. Quote, "I don't like it, but I have fundamentally no quarrel with it," Ryan replied. Console exclusivity, particularly in relation to the Call of Duty, is at the heart of the FTC's case against Microsoft's proposed $69 billion buyout of Activision Blizzard. It has pointed to Bethesda's upcoming space role-playing game Starfield, which is not coming out on PlayStation, as an example of Microsoft's behavior after it bought parent company ZeniMax. For its part, Microsoft has committed to keeping Call of Duty multi-platform for at least a decade. If it buys Activision Blizzard, Ryan has expressed concern that the fate of Call of Duty, should Microsoft obtain control over the franchise. About the fate of Call of Duty, he's expressed concern. So, Mac, what do you think about that? Is that clear? It's a lot of mumbo-jumbo, but if I was going to summarize it in a sentence, the main competitor to Xbox, the boss of Sony, Jim Ryan, doesn't think it's a big deal that Starfield would be exclusive to Xbox. Does it change your perspective?
No, not at all.
Why not? Why not?
I am not surprised in the slightest that somebody who, I mean, one of the things that we have said in this space, and, you know, I think is a fairly well-known thing, is that people buy PlayStation consoles, particularly driven by the exclusive games that are offered on just that console. So for somebody who directly benefits sales of their consoles on the concept of video game exclusivity, to say, exclusivity is not anti-competitive, for him to say that it was anti-competitive, he can't say something like that, because that's his whole shtick. And I'm not compelled by somebody saying that what I've been doing for however many years is totally fine, especially when that's the question. You know what I mean?
I don't know what you mean.
It's almost, but not quite, exclusively self-serving for him to say that, you know, that exclusivity of video games on a console isn't a problem, because he wants to benefit from having video games exclusive to his console.
No.
I mean, you can disagree with it all you
because
want,
he didn't.
but like,
he didn't acquire those studios. Those are Sony studios. So the difference here is we're talking about the potential acquisition of a new studio and a game that has previously been announced as multi-plat now being on a single platform because Microsoft backpedaled.
Okay. So let me rephrase it this way. Do you think that the head of a video game studio, or the head of a video game platform should be the decider, the sole deciding voice, or even if we should be giving them any credit at all into what is good, right, or best for the video gamers at large?
Absolutely. That's why the judge called him to the stand.
The judge didn't call anybody
a Microsoft
to the
employee.
The judge didn't call people to the stand. The various parties, the various parties called them to the stand. The FTC called people to the stand, and Microsoft called people to the stand. The judge isn't calling people to the stand.
And when
so
they called him
they're
to the
going
stand,
to
he had every opportunity to say, no, I don't think that this is right. But instead he said, hey, it's not a big deal. Console exclusivity.
Yeah,
and Max,
once again,
you're saying
he
that is fundamentally
doesn't
inaccurate. Hold on, wait a minute. The thing that you're saying that is fundamentally inaccurate is that Sony has created a lot of exclusives from Sony Studios. Uncharted, Ratchet and Clank, etc., etc.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But
100%.
it's not because Sony went out and bought something and then said, hey, we're now going to make this thing that was previously going to be multi-plat exclusive.
So,
and that's what Microsoft is doing. They bought Bethesda. Starfield was going to be on every console, right? And now Sony is saying, now Microsoft is saying, guess what? We're going back on our word. We're not going to have Starfield be on PlayStation. And so he's saying that's not anti-competitive. And that was your whole argument in the past, is we can't trust Microsoft to not make stuff console exclusive and potentially charge a ton of money for it. So I guess what I'm saying is the Sony guy disagrees with you.
My whole argument in the past is we can't trust Sony or Microsoft or Nintendo to be the deciders of what is fair and what is not fair, of what is good for consumers. Each one of these companies, in their own respective spheres, have shown themselves in multiple ways that they have no interest. And, this is the central tenet of capitalism just in general. It falls completely apart when there's not competition in a sphere. Any economist will hang their hat on that as their bread and butter. And so this is why competitive practices are things that are supposed to be, and whether or not they're actually doing it, but evaluated by a government agency. And this is why we have things like Sherman Antitrust Act and such.
That's what's happening.
But we can't say, it's like saying, any internet service provider, which I think ISPs, we all agree they're terrible. They're not doing what they're supposed to be doing. They're charging you through the nose. They're divvying up things. I mean, like, any ISP would be ridiculous to not say that their exclusivity in a sphere is totally fine. Even if they didn't want the lack of being able to break into a new area, they would still want to reserve that exclusivity to themselves in the areas that they already have. And that's kind of where the Sony people are coming at from this. I mean, I'm not surprised that the head of Sony is just like, yeah, I don't like it, but no problems here, and whistles on his way down the road, because he can't say that exclusivity is at the root of an anti-competitive behavior because of the exclusivity that he himself reserves for his company. I don't think that his words
I've already
should
said
be
why that's not right 3 or 4 times.
Okay, I think you're absolutely wrong, Mr. Nice Guy, and I wish you would see reason in this matter. Of course, I know you feel the exact same way about me.
The only reason that you think I'm wrong is because you don't understand how Sony's exclusives work. Name one company, Mac. Name one of the companies that Sony owns that makes these games. Ratchet and Clank, Uncharted, etc., etc. Right? That's what I'm saying. And I'm not trying to make you feel bad, but the fundamental difference is it wasn't a matter of acquisition for Sony. It was a matter of, hey, we built this from the ground up, and now we have these exclusives.
But he cannot.
And I don't think that that's any less of a crime.
State that exclusivity is the problem. And that was the proposition that he is being championed for in this article. Is he's saying exclusivity is not a problem. Well, of course, he has to say that. His entire empire, if for lack of a better term, is
Mac.
built on the exclusivity of these amazing titles for his system.
I know your internet lags, but you consistently interrupt whenever I'm saying a point that you disagree with. And it's hard to have a discussion in that scenario.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Nice Guy. I don't mean to talk over you.
Let's move on to our next news story. Okay. And if you don't understand how Sony is doing things, that's totally fine. But that's all I'm saying is that it's not the same thing, and you refuse to listen. So, here's the next news story, which is on a similar topic. And I thought this was super interesting. This is on Kotaku.com by Ethan Gag. If the sale of Activision Blizzard to Microsoft for $69 billion goes through, it could have big consequences for the future of Call of Duty on PlayStation. At least that's what Sony Interactive Entertainment CEO Jim Ryan keeps saying in a new deposition for the current lawsuit by the Federal Trade Commission. The PlayStation executive said the company won't share PlayStation 6 information with Activision if it eventually becomes part of Xbox. Now, here's where I have to acknowledge that you and a few of our viewers a couple episodes ago were right when they said, Mr. Nice Guy, are you concerned about the fact that Call of Duty could end up being worse on Nintendo Switch, on PlayStation, if Microsoft acquires if Microsoft acquires Activision? And I said, no, I'm not concerned about that. Now, this is proof it's true because, Mac, what they're saying here is we're not going to give out PlayStation 6 dev kits to Activision if Microsoft owns Activision, because then Microsoft knows what we're doing with our future hardware. So in this regard, I have to be the big person and admit I got to take an L here, because that's not a possibility that I would have thought of. Mm-hmm. What do you think about this generally? Like, do we really think that these companies don't know the direction that the other is going in terms of hardware? When next-gen hardware gets made, do we really think it's that big a secret?
I gotta admit, I have no idea. I think I'm right there with you that I don't think that... I think you're giving me too much credit for saying that, foreseeing how this would have turned out, because I don't think I was one of those voices here. you would think they would all be sort of pretty read into which direction they were going. But maybe it's a question of trying to reserve that information to themselves as long as is possible. And I feel like when you're building up for a whole console generation, you know, the units that you're buying of various chips have to be good giveaways as to what sorts of hardware you're going to be running on your new console. You know what I mean?
And I think you're right about that aspect of it, but I think that more so, I think about the difference between a PlayStation controller, PlayStation 5 controller, and an Xbox Series X controller, right? The Xbox Series X controller, in my mind, is basically very similar to the previous gen. However, the PlayStation 5 controller has unique haptic feedback. It has the touchpad. It has, you know, a lot of different little things that Xbox doesn't have. I don't think that Xbox is completely oblivious to what PlayStation is doing and vice versa. But I do think it's super interesting, the idea of one company having to give a dev kit to a company that's owned by the other in order for a game to get made.
Well, I can definitely understand why they wouldn't want to do it.
No, I get that. But I'll also say that I don't think this is the first time where this has ever come up or will ever come up, because Sony owns Bungie, right? And Destiny 2 is on all of these consoles. It's not like that's a good argument against the acquisition, but it is a good argument as to how Call of Duty could potentially end up being lesser or worse or less optimized on a future console. Mac, any last comments before we wrap news?
Like you said, I don't think either of us saw that coming.
No, it's interesting. And that has been news for the week.
All right. Well, now that we've taken a look at what's going on right now, let's take a little look into the past. This last week, Mr. Nice Guy, in video games is a good one. I'm pretty darn excited about it, and I think that almost everything here is pretty near and dear to our hearts, except maybe this one that I'm not quite sure about, from 2011, released for the PC, Kerbal Space Program. Mr. Nice Guy, was this one of yours?
I'm very familiar with it. It absolutely was not one of my games. Was it one of yours?
No, it wasn't, but it's one of those things where it's like it's always sat sort of on the periphery. For the benefit of any of our listeners who haven't, Mr. Nice Guy, how would you describe Kerbal Space Program?
As what I know about it is it's a game with bad graphics that looks boring. That's legitimately how I would describe it.
A game with...
and I've watched trailers for it, and it just was not for me at all.
Well, I was going to go with it's kind of a physics-based open world format flight sim, where you're trying to fly little green dudes to outer space. I thought for sure that this is one that you were into.
No, absolutely not. Very familiar with it, not my thing.
Yeah. Well, definitely not one that I got into, but I had this notion that it was a deal. Well, one that I know we're both big fans of, released in 1992 for the Nintendo Entertainment System, a little title called Little Samson.
Phenomenal game, and if I was gonna say, like, if there's one NES game that I want a physical cartridge of, it's Little Samson. It's probably $2,500. So that's not happening. But one of the best platformers made came out near the end of the lifespan of the NES.
Yeah, absolutely fantastic. I think one of my favorite things about Little Samson was that you had 4 different characters in it, each with their own health bars, their own play styles, their own abilities, and you could, on the fly, toggle between them. Just pause your game, swap to a different character in the middle of even boss battles, and then do that. So if you're, running down your health in one character, swap to somebody else, keep going. And also, each character had their own, title theme. So every time you were that character, you would hear their theme song. Just a lot of really cool and interesting things that absolutely very end of the NES cycle, and really shows off the type of power that you can do on the NES. Very surprising in the best of ways.
Great game.
That came out in 1992. In 1991, we had the release for the Sega Genesis of Sonic the Hedgehog. So Little Samson came out a full year after Sonic the Hedgehog, and we got our, blast processing. And
That's crazy.
I liked going fast, even though I found Sonic the Hedgehog at times to be a little bit frustrating with how you could kind of run straight into danger from time to time with Sonic. But Mr. Nice Guy, did you have a Sega Genesis?
I never had a Sega Genesis, and I actually still want one. I think Sega games would be super fun to collect, but I loved Sonic the Hedgehog and played it a lot at friends' houses and just different places. It's interesting, Mac, because you could go super fast in the game, but there were a decent number of secrets in the game as well.
Oh, yeah.
And so it's almost like you shouldn't go fast, but you want to because it's so much fun. Great game.
I, of course, had a Sega Genesis. Like I mentioned earlier, I didn't have a Super Nintendo till much later. Some people have a PS5 and some people have an Xbox Series X. But I really felt like it was way more back in the day that you had one console, and that was it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, dude. I don't know about you. My parents were not buying me a lot of video games growing up. It was rare that I would get a new video game until the point that I started saving money and mowing lawns and things like that. Like, video games just were not a thing. I mean, like, I had a few. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, even me, I got my Sega Genesis at a yard sale many years after it was no longer relevant. And because my parents weren't buying me video games. Anyway, I've gotten a little bit far. Back to history, Mr. Nice Guy. Next one, released in 2014 for the PC. Definitely an important one. Shovel Knight.
Dude, it's interesting you mentioned that based on a game we're going to talk about later.
Oh, yeah.
But Shovel Knight, so good. And I'm pretty sure that they just tweeted something out this week that in celebration of the anniversary of Shovel Knight, that they were doing free DLC for like Shovel Knight Dig, which is a more recent game that they made. But yeah, that's one example of a Kickstarter success story that kind of trumps many of the Kickstarter failures that have happened. Great game. They treated the people who put money down right. They gave them all the DLC for free. They supported the game for a long time. And I hope we get a sequel. Loved it.
Oh, yeah. Same here. Absolutely loved it. And we got so many great DLCs as a result. And I mean, obviously, I believe you gifted me a copy of Shovel Knight.
Did I gift you Shovel Knight?
I'm 75% sure that you gifted me Shovel Knight.
I might have.
It's something you would do. When you love a game, you share it. I appreciate it. Shovel Knight's great. But the last one, we're going to come back to this. June 21st, 1989, the end, or at least what I'm going to call the end of the Tetris Wars of the late 80s. And if you're not familiar with the Tetris Wars, it involves Atari, Nintendo, Moscow, the UK, and at the end, 250,000 Tetris cartridges are cut down in their prime. And we're going to come back to this because it involves some legalese.
Excited.
So that's been video game history for tonight.
Nice. Well, I'm really excited for this next segment. It's time for Indie Game of the Week. And I'm so excited to talk about this next game. Mac and I continue to be blessed with developers and publishers and individual game makers who are open to and willing to hear our opinions on different games. And so this week, we are going to be talking about a game called Bat Boy on Steam. We were gifted this game. Mac and I always like to disclose that we both got these review codes for free, but it will not affect the way that we review this game. Just to give a brief rundown, here's what it says about Bat Boy on Steam. Ryosuke isn't just your regular high school kid. He and his fellow sports star friends secretly battle against the evil invading forces of Lord Vicious, hell-bent on hosting sinister athletic events for his own amusement. Ryosuke is Bat Boy. Developed by X Plus Company Limited and Sanzai Games and published by X Plus Limited. Mac, I'm just going to open it up. I'd love to hear what you thought about this game.
I feel a little bit bad because Bat Boy was a Kickstarter project from last year. If we had talked about it when we, when we did our Kick or Kickstart segments on the show, I would have absolutely said Kickstart it. But, we didn't. I missed it. I somehow completely missed it on Kickstarter.
There's a lot of Kickstarters out there.
It's true, but I feel really bad for having missed this in the first place. But having played it now, I have to admit that there was a large chunk of my playtime that I thought, was this built on the Shovel Knight game engine? And I had to go check, and no connection to Yacht Club. So no way they're using the same game engine. But and I mean that as a compliment, a huge compliment, because I love Shovel Knight, but I also really loved the feel of Bat Boy. That's at least one thing I wanted to throw out there. Mr. Nice Guy, I know you had some similar feelings because you teased them just earlier.
Yeah, first of all, this game, it's effectively Mega Man meets Shovel Knight, in my opinion. And so when I saw this, sometimes, just to kind of give y'all a peek behind the curtain, when I'm looking at different games that we may want to review, sometimes I'm like, I would love this game. I don't know if Mac would love this game. But I looked at this one, I was like, oh, Mac would. This was made from action, this game. It's literally Mega Man meets Shovel Knight. So it's a platformer. You get different abilities. The graphics are phenomenal. If you like that type of game, there's a demo on Steam. So even though Mac, we didn't kickstart, we're talk about it in Kick or Kickstart, does have the playable demo. I love this game, but I'd love to hear a little more detail, Mac, about what you liked, maybe what you didn't like about this game, if there's anything you didn't.
There's a lot that I really liked about it. I will say, though, it definitely struck me as less Mega Man and more Ninja Gaiden in style. That was sort of the feel that it gave me. But still, definitely something I absolutely loved. Although I see where you're coming from with the varying powers that you pick up as each enemy that you defeat, you wind up getting that. Now, also, when growing up, not only a big fan of Mega Man, as those of you who are here for the live show definitely know and can see on my background all the time, but also I was a big fan of Power Rangers. I mean, who wasn't in those days?
Fantastic, loved it.
Yeah, this of course has that sort of has that sort of Power Rangery feel to it. I think the word Sentai got thrown around, or maybe that's not the word, but there is a word there sort of in common with what's going on.
Let me just say, I really liked this game. There was a lot that I liked. I liked that the controls were tight. I liked that the bosses were not too hard. There were a couple instances, I'll say, where you could kind of cheese your way through the bosses if you chose to. So, you know how you could, throw your bat and it would just, spin? If you did that and landed it on a boss that was stationary while it was doing some type of move, where, say there's a boss and it's in the middle of the screen, and it's doing this thing where it, shoots stuff in the air, and you're supposed to avoid the stuff that it's shooting. If you just throw your bat and let it spin on the boss, it'll just keep hitting it over and over and over again and do a lot of damage. And so stuff like that I thought maybe they could have looked at. My two major complaints with the game, Mac, are I thought the story was cheesy. I'm just being honest. And I mean, to stick with your Power Rangers analogy, Power Rangers is great. It's classic. But I don't think anyone would say that it wasn't cheesy at times, right? And so that was a little frustrating. The other thing, Mac, is the thing I like about Mega Man is you can equip your different powers. Now, in this game, they made it so that you could use all of your different powers and moves, but using different button combinations. And I think part of that is simply because you weren't equipping an ice beam and a fire beam and a wind beam. It was because you're doing a double jump or doing some type of move. And so they wanted you to be able to do that without having to equip it. My simple mind could not memorize all those button combinations. And so that got to be a little frustrating. But I think this game is awesome, and it may be in my top 5 at the end of the year in terms of indies.
It's definitely going to be up there for me. The only thing that I found particularly frustrating in the game was the fact that sort of these bonus areas gave you things that would unlock essentially health refills and things like that. And I didn't realize that until darn near the end of the game, so I didn't bother going through the bonus levels, and as a result I didn't have the like the health potions and such unlocked until I was well into endgame, which, you know, that's on me.
I would say, just as a reminder to our audience live and after the fact, part of the reason that Mac and I do these reviews is because we want to give attention to games that need more attention. I'm looking at this on Steam. Mac, I want to get your, just guess without looking, how many times do you think this game has been reviewed? And it came out May 25th of this year. How many reviews do you think it has on Steam?
I'm going to say 1,500.
No. But that's a good guess because it is that good of a game. It has 39 reviews.
39?
And that doesn't mean that 39 people have played it. That just means that it's not getting a lot of reviews. And so if you like this type of game, please go wishlist this. Even if you don't end up buying it, wishlisting helps the dev. And when it drops to a price that you feel comfortable paying, you can get it. Mac, I will say this. The game is $14.99. I think that that's a very reasonable price.
Mm-hmm.
And I can recommend this game without hesitation.
Yeah, 100%.
One last thing I want to say real quick, and then I want to hear what else you have to say. I like games that have this format, but also have like a central hub where you can go interact with characters, you can buy stuff, kind of like Shovel Knight. It goes back to that concept of, yeah, this is what, a 16-bit game, but they've incorporated modern-day game design to make it more fun. And I think they did a really good job with that. What else do you have to say before we move on, Mac?
Go out, buy this game, review it. It was great. It was great fun, and I think it strikes the right balance of everything. Playability, and the ability to pick it up, play for a little bit, put it down, and come back later. You know, that is hard to do well in games. Something that you can pick up, put down, and still want to come back to later, and this one definitely nailed it.
Absolutely. That has been Indie Game of the Week. Go check this game out.
Well, now we're going to turn to a crowdfunding project that's trying to get off of the ground. We call this segment Kick or Kickstart. I've got a link for y'all. I'm going to post it in the chat, and you guys can take a look as we discuss it here. This is called Carnival Hunt. This is a game that had a $50,000 goal. It's blown way past it and still has 18 days to go. They're asking a $25 minimum buy-in for a digital copy of the game, slated to launch the middle of next year, and there's lots of different tiers that they have for this game, and $35 if you say want beta access, and that is supposed to be happening late this year. Like I said, tons of different reward tiers. Don't scroll through them all. You'll go down a rabbit hole. But this game takes place in a Victorian era carnival, and it's a horror PvP multiplayer game. It reminds me a lot of, I think it was the Friday the 13th video game, where, or something right there around that era, where like you had characters who were all playing the camp attendees or camp counselors, and then Jason comes out of nowhere and you're running, and you've got a team game on one side, these mechanical bunnies, and on the other side with the monster, or in this case a magician on the other. Some amount of customization or specking for your character, a gear system, because mechanical bunnies, and as a multiplayer game, of course, it's going to be an online only game, because a PvP thing, you're gonna have to be doing it online. That's just the way of it. I particularly dig the aesthetic and a few different things about this, but Mr. Nice Guy, any thoughts now that you've had a chance to mull it over?
Yeah, what did you say the price is on this? I'm scrolling through for a copy of the game.
$25 for a digital copy.
Okay. First off, I think that's reasonable just based on looking at this. And I mean, we've talked before how we think indies should be a certain price. Something about this has a level of detail, and it's going to require a level of support because it is a multiplayer game that I don't think $25 is unrealistic for this. Like you said, Friday the 13th vibes. There's another game called Dead by Daylight that it kind of makes me think of. And I like this genre of game. I don't know, Mac, if you remember the guys and girls who made Left 4 Dead back in the day, at one point kind of splintered off and made their own studio and made this game called Evolve, where it was a 1v4, you could be the monster, and then there were like 4 different people hunting you. And that game flopped. And I think that this is a genre that, done right, can be very successful. It just has to be done right. The only thing I don't like is a matter of personal preference. I really just don't like horror games. I can handle it, but I just don't like the idea of being scared while I play video games. And so I don't know. For me, this isn't a thing, but I think this looks awesome.
No, I hear what you're saying. Even it's one of those things where it's tough because I have to try sometimes to really push myself outside of my things. I usually don't go for horror games either. This would definitely not be my genre of choice, and I especially don't go for games that are competitive. I don't like PvP games, just generally. It's not my thing. I'm so conflict avoidant. I can't stand to have video games where I'm playing against it, but I know that there are people who like that genre. And you know what? Probably some of those people are listeners here. So don't let our reticence with respect to PvP on my side or horror on Nice Guy's side dissuade you. I love the look of what they've done. It's dark. It's very almost BioShock.
Dude, I almost said it at the same time.
Yes. See, simpatico. I love the vibe. I love the look. I love what they're doing. And while the price point's a little higher than I think I usually would like to go, I think, Nice Guy, you nailed it, that it's a question of the type of support and detail. It requires a bit more for 3D assets than sometimes just your 2D assets, as we might see in other circumstances. I will say, though, that all of my, biases out front there about not enjoying PvP, that I do have a rule about our Kickstarters, and that is that if you're going to ask for money, you have to show that you can bring together all of the pieces of a video game and not just with fancy renders. And the only real effective way to do that is with a playable demo. And sadly, this game doesn't have a playable demo. Pause for Mr. Nice Guy to double check and prove me wrong like he did last Kick or Kickstart.
I won't prove you wrong. I mean, there may be one out there.
There isn't. I'm 99% sure that there isn't, sadly.
Don't you think you make an exception for a PvP game? Because how do you have a multiplayer demo without putting up servers? You know what I mean? I don't know.
That is very fair. How do you do it without all of the framework already in place? And I'm so glad that you said that, Mr. Nice Guy, because I might just give this a soft pass on the requirement to have a playable demo. Because you're right. That's an expectation that is so far above and beyond what could be achieved with the type of money that you have when you're putting together a game, when you're trying to kickstart a game. Easy for a AAA? Absolutely. Easy for indie? Far from it. Well, so, Mr. Nice Guy, I guess the time has come. What do we think? Kick or kickstart?
I mean, I can't stop watching this video where the magician, has this, he puts his hand in a hat, and then it, comes through a portal on the other side of the screen, and he picks up one of the rabbits that he's trying to get, and it just takes it out. This is going to be one of those games, if done correctly, it's going to be huge, and it's going to have a huge audience. I am excited to try this, even though I don't like horror games. I say kickstart. This looks awesome.
And Mr. Nice Guy, you convinced me. I'm going to say kickstart as well, even without the demo, just because the constraints of trying to make a functional demo for this game might be a bit too much for for an indie dev. So we wish these guys the best. And yeah, that's been Kick or Kickstart.
And now it's time for Nerd Flex.
A woohoo.
A segment where you, the viewers, try to stump the hosts, and you do on occasion. Now, if you're here live, you have a job to do. Please get your multiple choice, gaming-related questions in the chat. And Mac and I will use nothing but our noggins to try to get the answers to those questions. No Google, no phone a friend, none of that. And while we wait for questions to come in, we will go to the test bank. All right, Max, so we're ready. Are we ready for this first question?
Oh, I'm ready for it.
Which Street Fighter character got her own... Oh, well, there's a hint right there. Got her own live-action movie in 2009. Which Street Fighter character got her own live-action movie in 2009?
I think Chun-Li got her own live-action movie.
Did she get her own live-action? I don't remember this. I feel like I would have known. But I trust your judgment because she's one of the few female characters.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we could run through them all, but I know that, and I never saw it. It's possible that movie is animated and not live action, but I know that there is a Chun-Li standalone movie, and I don't know if that's the case for who else have we got?
Cammy. Is that it? There's other female Street Fighter characters.
There's one who's like, her moveset's almost identical to Ryu's or Ryu's, and she's like wearing a sailor outfit, I suppose. But I don't know her name because Street Fighter's not really one of my things.
Yeah, so I say we go with Chun-Li, final answer.
Let's do it.
Yeah, it was Chun-Li. I had no idea she had a live action, and I feel like that was an easy question, just due to the few number of Street Fighter characters.
I guess
the movie's going to be about the most popular one.
Yeah, I wonder if it was Ming-Na Wen who was in it, because like in that, you know, the Street Fighter movie with Jean-Claude Van Damme and such, I believe Ming-Na Wen was Chun-Li in that movie. I wonder if she reprised her role.
We'll have to Google that later. Well, Mac, I just came across a question in our thing that has a multiple choice. I didn't know there were ones with multiple choice in here. So I know we haven't done this question. Here's the question. It's a Rayman Raving Rabbids question. What ammo does Rayman shoot at the Rabbids in this minigame? Carrots, turnips, plungers, or bullets? What ammo does Rayman shoot at the Rabbids in this minigame? Carrots, turnips, plungers, bullets.
I have no idea. All I know about Rayman is this like a platformer, and I don't know what he uses. Shot in the dark, plungers, because like Quack Shot is cool.
Yeah, and I know the Rabbids are kind of goofy. Like I know Mario plus Rabbids was kind of a like tongue-in-cheek, poking fun type of game. I think carrots is way too on the nose. Like that's just too obvious. And I also feel like bullets is too serious. So it's either turnips or plungers, and I go goofy, so I'm with you. I think it's plungers.
All right, let's go full-on goof troop here. Plungers, final answer.
Dude, it is plungers. And it says question from Sly Cooper.
Thanks, Sly Cooper, for your question.
Oh, someone submitted it. Well, the chat is quiet today. Ooh, this is a good question. This is going to be a tough one. We're going to have to talk through it. What year was it released? The Nokia N-Gage. What year was it released? Nokia N-Gage.
Okay, so the Nokia N-Gage, I feel like it was before the PSP. I want to say early 2000s, because if it's what I'm thinking of, it's sort of, we weren't quite out of the indestructible Motorola, phase yet. You know what I mean?
Yep, I do.
Yeah, so I feel like 2001?
I would have said 2000 or 2001. Like, it was at a time when cell phones were popular. Nokia was still, like, a big player,
a contender.
right? Yeah, so it's like high school. So I would go with, we're dating ourselves. I would go with I'll go with 2000. What do you think?
Yeah, you go 2000, I'll go 2001. It's not multiple choice, so we don't have to commit to the same course of action. Them's the rules.
Deal. Final answers. That is the rules. Ooh, dude, we were off. It was 2003.
2003.
It's a good guess.
I mean, we're still in the right ballpark.
Yeah. Hey, that's been Nerdflex.
All right. Well, now we turn to a little bit of legalese. I am not a lawyer, just playing one on a podcast, and I teased earlier that we were going to talk about the Tetris wars of the late 80s. So, nice guy, throw your mind back, if you will, to June of 1985 when Tetris was created. It was created over there behind the Iron Curtain in the USSR. And about a year later, in 86, June of 86, comes along a dude named Robert Stein, who ran a software company in the UK. And he winds up like seeing a port of Tetris in Hungary or some such like that, and he's just like, dude, I've got to get the rights to global distribution for Tetris. This game's going to be huge. And so he starts trying to do that, and immediately sublicenses the rights to Tetris to Spectrum Holobyte for the North American market. Importantly, he licenses those rights for distribution, for creation of a game of tennis and Tetris and such, before he's ever even spoken with Alexei, who's the creator of Tetris. So obviously not a great way to start out, and eagle-eyed listeners might see where all this is going to crash like two steam engines together. So come November, Mr. Nice Guy, Stein still doesn't have the rights by the time that Spectrum Holobyte releases their PC version of Tetris. 7 months after the release of Tetris for the PC in the North American market, Stein finally has a signed contract that allows him to release Tetris games for computer systems, specifically for computer systems. Flash forward, and Stein has basically become this kind of like kingmaker, with people knocking down his door to try and make Tetris games. So now he's got to get those rights to people, because people want to make arcade versions, they want to make console versions, and everybody's coming to him because word on the street is he's got the rights to Tetris. And back in these days, it was a little bit harder to deal with, things going on in the USSR. They were a bit more, insular as compared to, well, anyway, point being is, while that's all happening, the companies that have been licensed rights to Tetris start sub-licensing their rights, including rights that they think that they have but don't actually have, because don't forget that Robert Stein licenses the rights to Tetris to companies before he even has signed contracts, before he's even spoken with the creator of Tetris. So this winds up being this sort of chain of copyright telephone, and eventually Atari starts making their version of Tetris through their company Tengen, who made games for the NES, and Atari passes along to Nintendo their go-ahead to make their own Tetris, but for the Japan market only. So Tengen is going to have theirs, be producing theirs in North America, but Nintendo can make theirs for the Famicom and the Famicom only. Now, at some point in time, word gets out that Stein isn't exactly what we would call a reliable narrator, and so people start flying to the USSR to try and secure licenses directly with Alexei. Nintendo wants it to be their launch title for the Game Boy, and they wind up getting there first. And they're chatting with Alexei and people and trying to make that deal happen. They say, yeah, sure, you can have the handheld rights, and, things are getting signed. And while they're there, the Nintendo guy shows off the Famicom version of Tetris that they made. And that's when crud really hits the fan, because everybody finds out, wait a minute, we didn't give you the go-ahead to make Tetris. What on earth is going going on with this. And that's when they say, hey, we got these rights by way of Atari. The Russians don't even know about this whole Atari and they are livid. So Nintendo gets their rights for Tetris on the Game Boy. They go home and then they set out the word that like, hey, console rights for Tetris are up for grabs, and Stein is, off his rocker or whatever he is. Anyway, by March of 89, Nintendo has the console rights to produce Tetris, and they're going to release it for the NES. Nintendo sends a cease and desist to Atari because they know that they don't have the rights to distribute on console, because now that is Nintendo's sole right. In early April, Tengen, Atari via Tengen, submits a copyright for Tetris in the American system, and a few weeks later turns around suing Nintendo for copyright infringement. And so all of this crazy cluster all going on at once. We finally get into court. Discovery depositions begin, and on June 21st, 1989, the judge orders Tengen to pull all their copies from the shelves and destroy them. 250,000 copies, because Atari never had the rights to make Tetris for consoles in the first place, but Nintendo can. So a classic game of telephone with video games, poor video games caught in the crossfire. But it's not like there are no copies of Tengen Tetris floating out there in the wild, but one of those games that got a nice, price boost from having 250,000 units destroyed. Anyway, that's our legalese for today. The Tetris Wars of the late 80s.
It's interesting because Tetris is one of those games where I feel like there have been many, many versions of it made.
There have, yeah.
Falling Block. I don't even know if Falling Block is a thing, but like people make Tetris clones all the time, like in Flash games. It's just one of those games where they just call it Tetris, but it's by a different name. You know what I mean?
Yeah, tons. I mean, Tetris is still the best-selling game, and we consider all of those various iterations of it to be a part of it. And it's really, really sad because in this whole situation, like, Alexei was basically getting no money from all these licensed and sub-licensed versions of Tetris. Everybody was making bank on it except for Alexei. Just a sad story. But, like, yeah, there's Tetris all over the place, either by that name or by another name. But yeah.
Well, that was awesome, Mac. You've heard a gaming historian. You should start a little YouTube and make them history videos, man. It'd be a lot of work.
No, those people do a much better job than I do.
I thought you did great. Keeping with the show, that's been our show. Thanks for tuning in, y'all. And now it's time for one last segment before we go, called What We've Been Watching and What We've Been Playing, where we talk about just that. The cool, nerdy stuff we've been into across all gaming platforms, consoles, mobile, whatever, retro, and also the stuff we've been watching across streaming services. VHS, DVD, digital video disc, and even maybe, I don't know, I can't think of another example. But Mac, what have you been into?
Well, I have been watching some, just various YouTube videos here and there. I've been getting on a little bit of a cooking bent lately, so I've been watching lots of cooking shows. And not like, Great British Bake Off, but like, videos where a YouTuber is just, making food and getting some good recipes. Also been watching an actual play thing on Dimension 20, and I've been meaning to watch that new Adam Driver film. I think it's 65, because they actually filmed some of that in this general area. So, like, I want to have a little look. As for playing, I've mostly been playing a game called Prodigal that I quite enjoy, and I'm sure we'll talk about that soon.
Absolutely. I forgot to mention, if you're here live, or maybe I did mention it, you have a job to do. Let us know in the chat what you've been watching and playing, because we're always looking for cool, nerdy stuff to get into. Mac, I have finally finished The Mandalorian. And I'm really excited to see what does or doesn't come in the future. I will just say that in case anyone hasn't watched. But that last episode was really, really good. I thought it was a good way to end the season. Been playing Fallout New Vegas. And Mac, the interesting thing, I feel like you've influenced me in such a positive way in terms of retro gaming. Because I have this huge backlog, especially now that I have the Steam Deck. And there's so many games out there. Like 2023 has been an amazing year for gaming. And I'm like, why am I buying new games? Why don't I just play through my backlog? So I finally finished GTA 5 a couple weeks ago. Fallout New Vegas is next on the list. Loving it, not rushing through it, just enjoying it, exploring, having a good time. And then I've also been playing a game called Cursed Crackers From Whom the Bell Tolls that we will also be talking about in a few years. Same developer as Prodigal. And don't want to get too much into that. But that's most of what I've been watching and playing. It's been a busy week. Chat's a little quiet, and that's okay. But, Mac, what are people into in the chat right now?
So Tiankum2112 has been watching The Boys, Dragon Ball Z Kai, and playing Rounds, Spider Heck, and Songs of Conquest. Whereas Galvatron's been watching Elemental and Turning Red and playing Diablo 4, Street Fighter 6, Final Fantasy 16, and Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. All the new stuff. Very cool.
All the new stuff. I was going to say, but that's great. We love the new stuff. Everybody, thank you so much for tuning in. Podcast awards are coming up. We'll have some more to say about that next week. But hey, thank you for tuning in to episode number 273 of Two Nerds in a Pod. Y'all are the best viewers and listeners in the world. Like it, share it, subscribe. You know what to do. Keep it nerdy, y'all. Deuces.
See ya.